There are roles in which incompetence can cost lives, and sometimes even lead to a fate worse than death. If you make decisions based solely on gut feelings or circumstantial evidence, you should never be in charge of investigating a critical matter like a homicide. When such negligence occurs, lives are ruined by incompetence. In this video, we examine a real-life scenario where this exact situation unfolded. The detective responsible for ruining one man's life and the lives of everyone once close to him is the same individual later assigned to re-examine the death investigation of Kurt Cobain. Right from the start, it is clear that this detective had already made up his mind about what happened, a conviction he openly expressed during an interview discussing his role.
Mike is joining us now. Mike, what was it about this case that made you say you knew this man was guilty from the minute you sat down and talked to him?
He started changing his stories. And one of the main things that also did to me is the way he described Maria Rudolph as this beautiful little girl, with these big brown eyes, and how she was so gorgeous. And he would sit on a stoop and watch her come down the street with his three buddies. And he would turn to the boys and say, "God, isn't she just gorgeous?"
You went back to the neighborhood with him. Is that when he talked about watching her?
Well, he mentioned that numerous times, but we were in the car driving back to Sycamore. We were driving past the crime scene. You know, without even talking, I knew where we were going. We were driving by, and we were watching him. And he just started turning his neck and really started looking all around the area. And I brought up to him, I said, "Hey, Jack, you remember this area?" He goes, "Oh, I remember this area very, very well."
New at 5 tonight, a piece of paper a 77-year-old man has fought years to obtain. Today, a judge granted Jack McCullough a certificate of innocence years after he was wrongfully convicted of the 1957 murder of a 7-year-old girl in Sycamore. Eyewitness News reporter Michelle Gallardo has the story.
We are not here to retry this case.
And with that, DeKalb County Judge William Brady issued Jack McCullough a certificate of innocence, clearing the 77-year-old of all charges related to his now vacated conviction of the 1957 murder of 7-year-old Sycamore girl Maria Rudolph.
We're just very happy that we got the result that we did. It's very powerful that the court that initially convicted Mr. McCullough is the one that's now saying that he's innocent.
The man was small, he recalls, and so posed no threat to him awake. But while asleep, the man launched a vicious stabbing attack with a sharpened toothbrush handle. He recalled, "I'm asleep and he has a sharp object and he's stabbing me in the face and head and eye. I took 2 stitches to the back of my eye. I was a bloody mess, and the blood behind my eye pushed my eye out. I pushed my eye back in and blood squirted across the room, and I was just covered in blood." Jack spent 5 years in prison and suffered attacks from other prisoners. Evidence existed that showed Jack was over 45 miles away from the scene during the time the crime occurred, although the police and FBI had known of this evidence. It was only later examined by the prosecutor's office, which led to his exoneration.
I was requested to look at the case since I'm a cold case detective.